Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of The Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, host also of RT's talk show, Crosstalk. So yesterday, there was a very interesting development. There was yet another telephone conversation between President Biden and President Putin. And if we look at the readouts from the call from the White House and from the Kremlin, we'll see some interesting differences and some interesting similarity. And it's worth taking a look. I mean, they're quite short, but it's worth taking a look and seeing what's the same and what's different. So if we look, first of all, at the statement of the White House, there's no indication from either side as to who initiated the call, but one should surmise it sounds very much like the Americans initiated this call. So the White House says they discussed a number of regional global issues, including the intent of the United States and Russia to pursue a strategic stability dialogue on a range of arms control and emerging security issues, building on the extension of the New START treaty. And then we had the familiar litany of US complaints about Russia, cyber intrusions, election interference. President Biden emphasized the United States' unwavering commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. President voiced our concern over the sudden Russian military buildup in Crimea and on Ukraine's borders, called on Russia to de-escalate tensions. And then right at the very end, he says President Biden reaffirmed his goal of building a stable and predictable relationship with Russia, consistent with US interests, and proposed a summit meeting in a third country in the coming months to discuss a full range of issues facing the United States and Russia. So that's the US readout. Now, if you look at the Kremlin readout, then they say again that they said the current Russia-US relations, pressing items on the international agenda were discussed. And it says, this is rather amusing, Joseph Biden confirmed the previously transmitted invitation to the president of Russia to take part in the virtual leaders summit on the climate to be held on April the 22nd. Notice what he's saying, it confirmed that he had submitted this invitation. There's no confirmation that the Russians are going to take part in this, but
I got your email, but I haven't read it. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, you confirmed it. Good, excellent. And then it says that both presidents expressed their willingness to continue dialogue, critical areas of global security. And then, interestingly, it says, in addition, Joseph Biden expressed interest in normalizing the state of affairs on the bilateral track, establishing stable and predictable interaction on pressing matters such as ensuring strategic stability and arms control, Iran's nuclear programs, situation in Afghanistan, and global climate change. So none of that appears in the White House readout. So this is very specific things that the Russians say Biden raised. And then it says, in this context, the US president suggested considering the possibility of holding a personal summit meeting in the foreseeable future. Notice the formulation. It says, yeah, the US president suggested it. Didn't say that the Russians were particularly interesting. They just took note of the fact that the US suggested it sometime in the foreseeable future. And then significantly, when exchanging views on the internal Ukrainian crisis, Vladimir Putin outlined approaches to a political settlement based on the Minsk package of measures. So in other words, he made clear that's the Russian position. We're not interested in any of your talk about Russian escalation, Russian troop movements, or whatever. Internal Ukrainian matter that has to be settled in accordance with the Minsk package. Now, I say that here are the differences. The difference is the Russians say, you want our help with all these things like Afghanistan and JCPOA. Hey, you got yourself into this mess. You get yourself out of it. Don't count on us to bail you out. But what is significant here is that all the way the Russians presented, these are all things that the Americans are proposing, and the Russians say, okay, well, go ahead, you can propose it. The intent here is the Russians are in no mood to placate the Americans on anything. They're just in no mood. There's nothing in this Kremlin readout that indicates any kind of sympathy for the American position, any willingness to help the Americans out. Basically, you're on your own, and as Putin said recently, said that, we will come to you when we want some help on something that's important to us. But all these agendas that you have, we're not interested. We're not buying. Peter, what's your take?
Exactly. It's this, the level of hubris is just astounding here. All the Americans want help or engagement with Russia on problems they created. Right. Russia didn't create them. Right. Okay. And this constant harping on protecting and preserving Ukraine's sovereignty. What is the single country that has compromised Ukraine's sovereignty? It's the U.S. by backing an illegal coup. Right. If there hadn't been a coup, the sovereignty of 2014 would resemble the sovereignty of 2021. But no, it wasn't Russia that overthrew the government. Right. Ask Victoria Nuland. She knows the whole story. Right. Okay. Right. Oh, we actually got a telephone call with the American ambassador, right. Mr. Piat. Okay. With her famous F the EU. That's right. Okay. So, I don't know where this came out of. I mean, number one is Biden is saying, if you want to talk, you can pick up the phone, or is it a madman theory? Is it, we've had week after week now, the entire administration, this bluster, this chest beating, chastising, and then all of a sudden you want to sit down and talk. I mean, are you signaling that you're erratic and the Russians and the Chinese and everyone else should be afraid of you? Is he pulling a Nixon, if you know what I mean? Right. No, the Russians are going to think, where did this come from? There's no substance to it. Right. And if you look at Russian diplomacy, Soviet / Russian, they're only going to meet when they think something's going to happen. They're not going to go and jawbone with Blinken, with Jake Sullivan. Victoria Nuland? Why? No, and what does Russia get out of it? Right. What does it get out of meeting? Nothing. They're not proposing anything.
Nothing whatsoever.
And until they do, Putin's going to say, you can just, you can dangle in the wind all by yourself, because Russia doesn't react to words. It reacts to realities. Right. Okay. And we've seen a flurry of events, particularly the last 2 weeks with NATO, in European capitals, Zelensky, and it's very dark foreboding. Those are realities, okay? Not, we want to have strategic dialogue and engagement. Huh? What does that mean? What do you mean?
Right. No, all very good points. And when the Russians listed these things, they said JCPOA, Afghanistan, and climate change. So Afghanistan, the Russian position is, leave. I mean, you said you were going to leave. I mean, what do you need us for? JCPOA, you want to go, I mean, the Russian position is entirely along with Iran. I mean, Russia is completely supporting Iran's position. You left the agreement, you get back into this agreement. Then, Iran will come back into compliance. So again, the idea that the Russians are now going to help out the Americans to cobble together some sort of a face-saving formula. They're going to apply pressure on Iran just so that America can look good. Why would Russia want to do anything so stupid? And as for the summit, well, I mean, they have a bad experience of what happened in 2018. I mean, essentially, the Russians were ambushed. I mean, they thought they were going to Helsinki to work out at least some sort of a preliminary agenda for going forward with a kind of US-Russian partnership along the lines that Trump had promised in 2016. Instead, Putin was ambushed by the media for these constant attacks. I mean, it would be just one after another, and then the whole treason, traitor, and all that media hysteria after Helsinki. So that's exactly what's on the agenda now. I mean, they saw what happened in Anchorage. Right. They're not going to go for another Anchorage. they have Blinken or somebody or Biden lecturing them about Navalny or human rights. It's not going to happen. So, it's just a fantasy world to think that Russia would buy after all of the insults, after all of the threats, after all of the sanctions. And as you said,
do you think he's a killer?
In the past,
do you think he's a killer?
Yeah, calling
he has no soul. Well, then
yeah.
What's the point of meeting? I mean, we have intermediaries, and you want to talk about something substantive. I mean, if that's the quality of your discourse, what's the point in talking?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And you brought up Anchorage, and I think Anchorage will be the anchor of American foreign policy under Joe Biden for this administration. And I think that's the kind of reception the Chinese and the Russians are going to give the Biden administration. You want to keep moving pieces on the board. You keep threatening. What do you want? Okay. And you're in no position to make any demands.
Right.
You're no longer. Those days are long gone.
Right.
The days of a multipolar world where the international community has to find a way forward. And it has to be done collectively. That's where we are right now. This unipolar moment, which Blinken and Sullivan and Newland think still exists, it's been gone for 2 decades.
Right.
And that's why American foreign policy is in such a mess. And I want to reiterate what you had to say. All of America's problems around the world, they created them. The Russians didn't do it.
Right.
Okay. And on top of it, I find it very insulting is that there's no problem. There shouldn't be any issue with American and NATO forces moving inside Ukraine, training on the ground, and Russia cannot move its own forces within its own borders. Really?
That's exactly, yeah, no, right. I think that's what Lavrov said the other day, which is that I didn't realize that we were under some sort of an obligation to inform other countries about movements of our own forces within our own borders. So yeah, that's exactly it. But it is a striking that this tone from the Russians is very different from the tone they'd applied before, because this tone is one in which they're saying we are in no mood to help you out. We're in no mood to be your punching bag. We're in no mood of thinking that, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday and Sunday, we're going to call you a killer and we're going to impose sanctions. But Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, we're going to make nice and have a nice little chat around the fire. They're just not, the Russians just not in no mood for that. Which is why this tone is very much President Biden said this and this. No sense that, we're in agreement or whatever. Yeah, okay, they took note of that. But then when it came to Ukraine, boom, Putin said exactly what the Russian position is. That's it. This is an internal Ukrainian matter, has to be settled on the basis of a Minsk Accord. Not interested in any nonsense about Russian troop movements.
And the Minsk Accords, where Russia is a guarantor, France is a guarantor, and Germany is a guarantor. The United States has nothing to do with it, okay? And it was an agreement that Kiev said that they would fulfill, and they have, to date, they have not done it. To the point where in the latter days of the Poroshenko regime, they were very open in flaunting it, that we have no intention. Well, that's the only thing we've got. That's the only thing we have. That's the only thing you can make reference to. And you know what it's about? It's about Ukraine's sovereignty. That is the only agreement with great powers in Europe and Russia vis-a-vis Ukraine. That's the only thing we've got right now. And that's why there is constant reference to it. There's no other ideas out there. Right. And it's up to Ukraine to fulfill its obligations. If it doesn't, then the future of Ukraine as a sovereign state is in danger. Right. And I mean that seriously, and that's not hyperbole.
Right. No, exactly right. And again, so if you go by the White House readout, then you have to then ask again. So what exactly was the point of this? Why did you have this telephone call? Just again to come up with all these cliches the Russians are not interested in about their dangerous troop movements and provocative and all the stuff about the cyber attacks and election interference. I mean, they're not interested in any of this.
Well, what's really interesting, for me anyway, is that they're putting the Russians on notice. Okay, that's what they want to say. But see, the problem here is that what we're seeing now in public statements and in policy is a result of the Russiagate hoax bleeding into policy. Now, the Russians are just saying, this is your own internal political problem, okay? You have these phantoms that you're dealing with. Maybe you need to seek some help, okay? Because you're chasing phantoms. We have no idea what you're talking about. As a matter of fact, there was an investigation by one of your guys named Mueller, and he didn't find anything. And what was like 40 million bucks, how many witnesses and depositions were there? I mean, I would refer you to your own people, okay? But as far as your hoax is concerned, we have no comment on it because it's a hoax to us. Now, that's your problem. Again, we warned our viewers here that it would bleed into policy. That's why we're putting the Russians on notice, because they've painted themselves into this corner that they can't get out of. They can't break out. It's like that Bloomberg article I read years ago. The administration is trying to seek ways to help Russia get an off-ramp. Actually, it's what the Russians could do that for the U.S., okay? But they have no interest and incentive in doing it. Why? Okay, they haven't been given one reason here. So the internal political problem that the United States has Russia itself has nothing to say about. It's just foolish.
Right. No, that's exactly right. So in other words, any proposed summit would essentially be an ambush for the Russians. They would show up, and all the media would be in tow. And what would the media do? Hey, Mr. President, did you ask the Russians about Navalny? Hey, Mr. President, did you tell Putin not to interfere in any more U.S. elections? Hey, why did you try to assassinate the Skripals? I mean, the whole idea that they're going to go through this nonsense once more, is laughable. I mean, and again, history, we have the Helsinki summit, which of course was an absolute disaster. Again, there wasn't any specific agenda. At that time, I think the Russians still had a kind of somewhat naive view of Trump. They still were optimistic that Trump could break out of the prison that he was in. But if you look at that, and then you look at the 1961 Vienna summit, which was another absolute disaster, which is what happens when you don't prepare and you just simply show up and start making speeches. And it's clear Biden has absolutely no idea. A meeting about what? What exactly does he want to discuss?
What's interesting to me, when you look back at that Chuck Todd interview of Biden, and this is how it's turning into a nightmare for the Biden people, because they ran their election that Putin's Trump's a traitor, collusion is real. Mueller just didn't find it. Okay, it's real, but it's there. Okay, so it helped maybe on the margins to get Biden elected, on the margins maybe. And so now the administration comes in and it's like, oh, okay, that's over. But the media is painted itself into a corner and they can't let go of it because they don't want to look into the mirror because they're going to see themselves naked. Okay, so you have to keep going with it. Now the Biden administration is going to, they will be tested or maybe even treated the way Trump was in Helsinki. So it's turned into a complete disaster because it's really interesting. Chuck Todd and others in the media are driving this. The administration has no control over it whatsoever.
Right.
So it worked to their advantage during the election, and now it's haunting them.
Yes. Yeah. The Chuck Todd interview was very interesting. The thrust of it was all, hey, are you ready to go to war with Russia and China simultaneously? So, what are you going to do about Ukraine? And what are you going to do about Taiwan? When are the missiles going to be launched? When are the warships going to be sent there? So, you're absolutely right. This is kind of being driven by the media, but it's also a result of the Biden administration having absolutely no idea what they really want to do. So they say, we need some arms control. We need to stabilize the nuclear arms race and so on. But they kind of divorce that from everything else. But they don't really realize that anything like that, any kind of arms control agreements, for them to be any sort of meaningful, they have to be within the context of a general improvement of relations. Otherwise, they're nothing. I mean, they just go, disappear with the wind. As other arms control agreements have done so. So they really don't know. I mean, the same way that on all the other issues. I mean, look, we have the Afghanistan. So today, or yesterday rather, Biden announced that the United States intends to withdraw by September the 11th, and this is being treated as a huge story. The New York Times, banner headlines. So, but what's the point of this? I mean, what is the point of delaying it by 6 months? I mean, what can you possibly achieve in 6 months that you can't achieve now? And particularly is when you set a deadline, then everybody already knows that's a deadline. So why should anyone bother to do anything to help out the United States? Because they know that, well, that's the deadline. So it's a ridiculous measure, but it shows that how clueless they are. I mean, it's like they say, one day they say this, next day they say the opposite. So in the same way, oh yeah, Russia is horrible, terrible strategic threat to the United States. But can we have a summit, please?
Yeah, I mean, this with the September 9th, I mean, they're trying to 2021, the symbolism of it all. If it is, it's really kind of morbid. Okay, I don't believe it. Okay, I mean, they'll say they're withdrawing, and then they'll say, but we're going to keep 500 there. Okay, and that's what they get. Watch, they're going to do it. I told you, if they don't get out on May 1st, they'll never get out. Okay, and they're kicking the can down the road. All right. And the security situation just gets worse and worse because May 1st, September 11th, I mean, it's the Taliban that owns the clock, okay? They own the clock. Or is it they just didn't want to fulfill Trump's agreement? Is it that petty, George? Is it that petty?
Well, it could be. I mean, the striking thing about, if you read the New York Times today, this huge front page story about this historic Biden is proposing to withdraw from Afghanistan September 11th. He's a man with a vision. He's enacting this policy, and there's no mention of Trump's agreement until the penultimate paragraph. As I sort of mentioned, there actually was a signed agreement with the Taliban last year. So that's it. So in other words, you want to present this as some great symbolic policy on the part of this new administration, as if, well, we have done this historic thing. Other administrations have tried, but we did it. We withdrew from Afghanistan. Well, actually, there was already an agreement signed a year ago.
I think it was Newt Gingrich that was on Hannity last night. And no, it was Lindsey Graham. Excuse me, Lindsey Graham.
That was
I guess I don't know what the timing was, but getting out of Afghanistan, and he went droning on about how the return of Al Qaeda and ISIS, which of course ISIS wasn't in existence when we invaded, but anyway, I mean, what they're selling the public is a completely fake bill of goods. I mean, it has nothing to do. I mean, he couldn't even remember Taliban, but Al Qaeda. It's really such a disservice to people where they're not even given the very basic facts. And the New York Times penultimate paragraph. Well, that was I'll say it took Trump a lot of courage, and I give him credit for that. Okay, against all of the odds, and they come to an agreement. And then because it was Trump, they don't want to implement it, or it was a way to get it, hoping that he wouldn't get re-election so they could try it all over again for the next 20 years here. I mean, again, these people are just so unserious. It's so unclear if they have any kind of strategic vision whatsoever. And I think the Kremlin readout is basically reading between the lines, is saying that when you know what you want to do, you got our number, okay?
Yes, no, that's exactly. And that follows on from what Putin had said the day after Biden had made that killer comment. He's saying that the Americans think that they can sanction us, insult us, and so on. But when they want us, they can just sort of whistle and we'll come running and to help them out. They said, no, we will use the Americans when it's in our interest to use the Americans. I mean, when it's not in our interest, we're not going to do it. And I think this is exactly what the Russian. I mean, you read the readout, it's pretty much saying, oh, President Biden said this, he said this and this. Okay, fine, all right. I mean, duly noted. Thanks.
Yeah, but if we look at the immediate situation with Ukraine, all of this buildup, all of this bluster is coming from one side, and it's going to be very interesting how they're going to, untie themselves from this Gordian knot, because they're the ones that have set everybody up, got everyone's tensions up, got everyone's nerves flaring. And what are you going to do? See, I mean, and this will show the level of seriousness of these people here. I mean, what's the magic? What's the magic spell? To end all of this, like we're satisfied. Right. Why? How? What has changed?
Right.
I can't fathom it, because this hasn't been thought out at all. I mean, getting everyone to go along, cheering. You got the all of the 5,000 bureaucrats working for NATO saying, yes, this is what we need here. Right. But what do we do next?
Right. Yeah. No. Exactly. And again. If you look at Lavrov's statement, I think it was yesterday when he was gave a press conference after his meeting with the Egyptian foreign minister. He was basically, taking a very tough line. I mean, this is, this isn't sort of, Putin, who can be quite menacing. Lavrov is a diplomat; he's very smooth. But I mean, he said this: look, Ukraine, there was an illegal coup, the legitimate government was overthrown. Ukraine, Kiev, launched a war against its own people. And that's what is going on. He's launched a war against its own people. And when he says that, oh, well, we wouldn't launch a war against our own people, Zelensky is lying. I mean, that was Lavrov who said this. This is very strong stuff. Again, the Russians are just simply not in a mood to find some sort of a face-saving formula whereby the NATO powers can say, we did it. We saved Ukraine. We thwarted Russian aggression. Russia was about to invade, but we thwarted it. And so no, we're not playing that game.
What could happen, George? I would actually put money on it. Is that Blinken will come out, we need a press conference immediately, breaking news. The United States is to break the deadlock here and to show our good faith. We're going to support, the Minsk agreements. Okay. And it's been on the table. Right. Since 2014, and the U.S. doesn't want to touch it because it doesn't because basically it's a call for federalization, and the U.S. is completely against it. Okay, right. And so what they're going to do is, we'll find a compromise, and then we support the Minsk agreement, and it's like everyone else at the table is like, where have you been?
Right. Yeah. No. That's right. And then of course they'll lie.
The New York Times will report it was as if it was Blinken's idea.
Exactly. And then of course they'll lie about it, because then they'll say, oh, the Minsk agreement is an agreement between Russia and Ukraine, and so therefore they can then say, oh, Russia is violating the Minsk agreements. I mean, it's this little game that they're always playing by distorting what the Minsk agreement is. Counting on the fact that people who read the New York Times or watch the U.S. media don't know what the Minsk agreement is. It's it's an agreement between Russia and Ukraine. No, it's not an agreement between Russia and Ukraine.
Yes, the media, what it distorts here. This is an intra-Ukraine crisis. Okay, and it is a crisis because up to 14,000 people have been killed. Okay, and needlessly by the Kiev government. Yeah. And so it was representatives from Lugansk and Donetsk meeting with the Kiev regime, and they hammered this out. The guarantors are Russia, France, and Germany. Right. Russia is not part of the agreement. Right. What it is just saying is their role there, because they have contact with the Donbass. Right. They can communicate. They're the conduit. Russia's the conduit for them to communicate to the outside world, to like Germany and to France. Okay, but you're right. It's always, this is a conflict between Russia and Ukraine. No, this is how to resolve a conflict within Ukraine, where a solution has already been agreed to. It has just not been implemented. That's what's going on in Ukraine.
No, that's exactly right. Which is why while the White House readout in this call was full of all these, these cliches and complaints about, Russian menacing and aggressive moves and so on in Crimea and so on, and then the Kremlin readout specifically said it's an internal Ukraine matter, has to be resolved on the basis of the Minsk Accords. So, I mean, the way the Americans want to play it is that, well, we thwarted the Russians. We got tough. Biden laid the law down, and we got tough. So, but the point is that the Russians know about all these games that the Americans play, and they're not going to go for it. So that's why any summit at all would be very bad for the Russians. I mean, and that's why it's just simply no reason for it. I mean, they know that essentially this will be an ambush. It just would be Russia, and then everybody can just pounce on the Russian delegation.
It would just be a media circus. That's all it is, okay? Because it's not policy driven. It is not it's not meeting to culminate an agreement on something. No, that's not how summits work. Ask Donald Trump, okay? Exactly. So, I mean, for me, this is another internal affair. It's, we put Vladimir Putin on notice, okay? And that's how it's going to be received. And that's the way. That's the way they're navigating the spillover of Russiagate hoax into policy, because I think they're beginning to realize they've really put themselves into a corner, because real issues to resolve, you're going to get it from your own side saying, but you're dealing with a killer, someone with no soul, and then it creates paralysis. Right. And then also it creates just verbiage and bluster that doesn't mean anything. And I'll tell you, it's like being with a hysterical spouse. After a while, you just turn it off. It's like,
right. No, I think it's that is right, and that's why that game that Blinken wants to play is that. We have so many concerns with Russia, and then you have the familiar list. But when it's in our interest to do so, we will cooperate with them. Well, it's not going to work like that. Russians are just they're not going to be abused, insulted, sanctioned, accused of God knows what without any evidence. And then, but when the Americans want something from us, then we're going to rush over and help them out. I mean, it's a stupid idea. And however much the Russians keep insisting that this is a stupid idea, it's not going to work. Blinken and Biden, they keep playing this.
But you have to definitely believe that the Russian Foreign Ministry studied very carefully what happened in Anchorage, and they're basically saying, Blinken, he's a joke. I mean, is he the interlocutor that we need to talk to? Because he doesn't seem to know what he's talking about. He seems to be living in the past. And he likes to make threats, and he likes to talk big, but he has no, follow-up. I mean, again, what's the worth of that interlocutor? I mean, you already know, his mettle.
Right. No, and it is kind of interesting, this tone in Russia, because you had the German foreign minister the other day, Heiko Maas, did his familiar complaints about what Russia was doing within its own borders and, its troop movements and so on. Lavrov was asked about that and said, we kind of want to know from the Germans something that, the Germans should have a say about, which is about Navalny. I mean, we've been making endless inquiries about these medical findings about Navalny. I mean, and, you say he was poisoned, and every time we go to the Germans to get some documentation from them, they don't offer us anything. So we would like information on that, and then maybe we'll listen to you about Russian troop movements within its own borders.
See, one of the things that the Washington consensus they cannot get through their thick skulls is that we live in a world where countries like Russia and China can simply say no.
Right.
And that's the reality that we live in right now. And when you have other great powers that can say no, I got a secret for you, George. That's when you need to use, well, diplomacy.
Right.
That's what it's useful for.
Right.
Okay? Because the way the media personalizes everything, countries are not friends.
No.
Okay? Countries don't have friends. Countries have interests.
Right. Right. No,
Okay.
I think that's right. And that's why the summits of the 1970s were such a success. It's not because the United States or the Soviet Union liked each other, like their domestic policies, but they had a specific interest, and therefore, there were a number of geopolitical crises that both the United States and the Soviet Union could work to resolve, namely crisis in Vietnam, in the Middle East, and there were the arms control agreements. That's why, when Brezhnev came to the White House in 1973, and then, Nixon and Brezhnev were hugging, it's not because they liked each other very much, but there were specific interests that were, that both powers knew that, they had to address.
Yeah, see, I've said this for years now. The bombastic rhetoric, it's almost impossible to take it back. All right. And so what you do, what the Biden people, the corner that they've been painted into is that all of the claims and accusations made against Russia and its president, you can't turn around and say, we're going to wipe the slate clean. No, because too many people have vested interest in keeping this at a boiling point. And of course, the media likes it a lot because they like to present it in such a black and white fashion and devoid of facts. I mean, we've talked about facts exclusively on our podcast here. And so they've created a dilemma for themselves. And I want to repeat, this hoax that they ginned up under Trump, it's like a genie out of the bottle. How do you put it back in? How do you resolve it? They can't.
They can't. I mean, I don't think they truly have their hearts in resolving it either, because I think if you look at the people who are around Biden, I mean, they really don't like Russia. They really don't like Putin. I mean, their go-to response is to do something about Russia. But they have an idea that, well, hey, Russia can help us out on things, and they always know that a summit, there's always a lot of good publicity from a summit. It's a big world event. Everyone's focused on it. Media's there. Biden can look like a world statesman. So they like all of that. But they just don't realize is you can't just turn these things on and off, like a light switch. You can't just say, well, we're going to hit you with sanctions. You're a killer. You have no soul. Oh, but we'd like to discuss, Iran and the global climate crisis with you. I mean, climate, that's another, just to say there's a parenthesis about the climate. So I think Russians really don't care about this. So that's why, when they bring these things up, Putin noted that he noted an invitation. Okay.
Yeah, but see, another really huge misconception about Russia in the Western media, and I guess in think tankistan, is that it's about Putin. No, it's not about Putin. It's about Russia and its national security interests.
Right.
No, whoever follows Putin, whenever that is, it's going to be someone remarkably like him. Okay? Seriously, it's not going to be any huge departure. I mean, is Russia going to say, well, we're going to embrace wokeism. We don't care about our sovereignty. Okay? And, oh, come on, you can buy up all of our assets. We don't. I mean, no. I mean, the thing is this fixation on Putin is so beyond the point. It has nothing to do about him. Of course, they like the pictures of him and they like to make fun of him on Saturday Night Live. It's a little cottage industry, and then people make careers out of it, lucrative ones. And the good thing for them is they never have to be right. Okay, all they do is this demonizing character.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with policy. As a matter of fact, it's a detriment to policy.
Right. Well, I think that's it. I mean, I think that they don't even have any real sense of, policy. Like, what is it that you really want from Russia? What agreements do you want to sign? Because then you'd have to say, okay, you have to work with a partner. I mean, imagine if you had a business partner and then you spent your time denouncing him and talking about about his personal life and about the way he dresses and what a horrible person he is and everything else. And, but let's do a deal. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. So this is why these things are so ridiculous. But of course, the media are now playing into this whole a summit was discussed. There's going to be a summit. There is not going to be a summit. There is absolutely no reason whatsoever for the Russians to agree to something so half-baked.
And even more so, I mean, the U.S. left the Iran deal. Okay, I think that the foreign policy wonks have no idea that how that damages the image of America in the world. That was an important agreement. Everybody else stayed in it that signed it, except for one country. And now you want to come back? I mean, what do you want? And then your whole performance in Ankara, your whole policy towards China is about the Uyghurs in Hong Kong? Really?
Right. No,
I mean, it just looks like it's not. I mean, it's a very, very powerful country with a powerful military that is not serious. That's what it looks like from the outside.
Right. No, that's exactly right. Your whole policy, because whatever you think about the Uyghurs, basically you are president of the United States. You should be concerned about what are United States' interests. Though that's the reason why you're in that office. You're not the president of the Uyghurs. You're not president of China. You're not president of any other country. You're just president of the United States. So you have to address what are United States' interests. So when Blinken just talks about values, rules-based order, he's doing nothing for the American people, because, you have to address their interest. What is it in their benefit? Talking about values and saying, this is, we want democracy around the world. It doesn't do anything for Americans, and it certainly doesn't do anything for anyone in the rest of the world.
But the Blinkens of this world, they put themselves in the worst possible position. Is that the Chinese will say, well, mind your own business. Yes. And by the way, we can talk about Black Lives Matter if you want. Oh, how many 200 people in the Capitol Hill riot? What about their rights? Where are they? Do they get? Did they get bail? What about their legal staff? I mean, they could go on and on and on. But the thing is that what is the United States? What is the United States willing to accept? Policy-wise, to force China to treat one of its minorities better. I mean, what do you go to war? Embargo the entire country? What are you going to do? Right. See, I mean, you can have an issue, but I mean, what's your leverage to get what you want? You have zero leverage.
Right. I mean, in the case of Russia, it becomes even more ludicrous when you condition your relations about Navalny. One person, you're saying that's what's the most important. I mean, when you have Borrell goes to Moscow and starts talking about Navalny, that's your most important issue. You'd have thought quite a lot of issues to discuss between the European Union and Russia, and your priorities, Navalny, even though that is going to really annoy them. And even though they actually warned you not to bring this up, because if you do bring it up, we're going to bring up a lot of other things. And you go ahead and you still bring up Navalny. And then after this debacle, you go home and you start whining, and writing these blogs day after day, whining about how mean the Russians were to you. I mean, people like that just aren't serious.
And that's what I truly think, that under this administration, what we have now, we're going to have this variations of what we have now for the entire administration. I think that's the point where Russia and China have gotten. They've just fed up Okay. I mean, the thing is they're always waiting for Putin to leave, and then Russia will leave. Now, but the Russians have this attitude is that, fine, you want to behave this way. This is your self-image of yourself. You're just one big virtue signaling, and you peddle myths and lies and hysteria. When you're ready, when you grow up, when you sober up, maybe we'll talk.
That's right. Yeah, yep. That's right. That's the only conclusion one can draw from those readouts. All right, Peter. We will, of course, maintain our laser-like focus on the summit, quote, summit, unquote, between Biden and Putin. Remember, we are now on Rumble. Look us up there. And if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.